The cinema specialist Phil and John are back, and today we are listing out our 10 favorite Tom Cruise movies. Each one of us is going to do a list 10 to 1. We're ranking them all to get hyped up for Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, which comes out the end of this month. It has been a very long time since we have done a top 10 list. I think it hasn't been since March we figured out, or was it February? It was right before the Oscars. We did the worst movies nominated for Best Picture since 2000. And then we did do a plot twist bracket, which was fun in March, but we took the entirety of April off just because of how busy I was with other podcasts. And now we're back, and we're going to talk about Tom Cruise, something I think everybody knows at least something about, right? It'd be hard to find people who haven't seen 10 Tom Cruise movies. I would be surprised.
You know, there's a possibility some people haven't seen a whole 10, but it's very surprising at this point, especially when we're coming up to our 8th Mission Impossible movie.
Well, you have 7 right off the bat. That makes that so easy, right? If you want Jordan Alford's comment, he says it's Magnolia, end of video, LOL. That is my number one movie, done. I know. Everybody, I know that's what's funny is if you listen to us enough, Magnolia is like 25 all time or 20 all time for me. So obviously that's going to be the number one Tom Cruise movie. But we are going to dive into this. We aren't doing some crazy stipulations. Like I know in the past, we were like, what is considered this? What is considered that? At the end of the day, we're doing this pretty much. Is Tom Cruise in the movie? I have one exception. I think John has the same exception. And that is Tropic Thunder. Tropic Thunder is really his only true supporting role. And I got to the point where I was at 11 movies and Tropic Thunder was in there. And I said to myself, am I really going to drop off the 10th movie, which is quintessential Tom Cruise, in order to include Tropic Thunder? And I said to myself, no, I'm not counting Tropic Thunder as a Tom Cruise movie for the sake of this podcast, just because it would have been silly to keep that and get rid of Fallout. Yeah, there you go. There's my number 10. But it would have been silly to get rid of that because I just feel like it would have been like, what's the point? Like at the end of the day, Tropic Thunder is about so many other people. Tom Cruise has more of I think he's in 4 or 5 scenes in that movie, if that. And if this was best Tom Cruise performances, that might be number 2, maybe number 3. But in terms of best Tom Cruise movies, I figured I would leave it off.
Yeah, I approach it with the same stipulation. Essentially, how I approached this was, is Tom Cruise listed as one of the main actors in the movie? Yes. Does he show up on the movie poster? He can count at that point.
Yeah. And he shows up on the movie poster of almost every movie he's in, huh?
Front and center, usually.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We talked about, so we were covering, and it goes through till the first week of June. We've been covering the Mission Impossible movies over on the Patreon for $5 Tuesday. So every Tuesday since, what was the first one we did? It was the last week of April. And now we just got through. Tomorrow we're going to be putting out Ghost Protocol. We skipped Mission Impossible 2. Don't worry. And so we're doing this, doing these movies. I got distracted by the comment here, but we're doing these movies. And if you want to hear us talk about them more in depth, check that out. But we also get into a serious conversation about how Tom Cruise is the last great movie star. Yeah. And when his career is over, he might genuinely be considered like the greatest movie star potentially ever. Something that John and I discussed on that podcast. This was during our first Mission Impossible one, which came out in April. We discussed how the top 10 highest grossing actors of all time worldwide, 9 of them have appeared in Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. The only one who has not is Tom Cruise. That is absolutely insane when you start to break that down. Now, granted, his movies are making $1 billion, which could not be the case back in the days of Clark Gable and Cary Grant and all of that. But at this point, we're just talking who's the biggest movie star. It's Tom Cruise. And that's like a hard thing, I think, sometimes for people to really grasp. But as we were going through this, John and I were watching a bunch of movies. We were rolling through these movies. You don't find many bad Tom Cruise movies. John is a psycho, and he goes and watches Cocktail and The Firm and Night and Day.
I have to make sure.
Yeah, John's crazy. But if you just watch like pretty much every Tom Cruise movie that's come out since the first Mission Impossible is at least good. And that's a pretty insane run. There might be 1 or 2 movies in there that aren't, like The Mummy or something like that. But for the most part, his movies are always good. And with how big of a filmography he has, that's pretty insane. Kevin O'Donnell, you distracted me. I remember when Phil compared Jake O'Kane to the kid from Magnolia. It was Drew that I compared to the kid from Magnolia, not Jake O'Kane. It was Drew. So anyway, go ahead, John. I was so distracted by that. It threw off my entire train of thought.
It's okay. Honestly, when I'm watching Tom Cruise, and this is something just to throw out a comparison here. Back in November, when we did the Ridley Scott top 10, we were talking about all those movies. We were kind of like stretching towards the end of that top 10. I'm pretty sure what I ended up with The Martian, which I'm not too high on, and I'm pretty sure I gave 2.5 stars. From all the movies of Tom Cruise's that I have watched over the last 2 weeks, let me tell you, it's been a lot of Tom Cruise movies.
Yeah.
I believe I'm at 26 movies in the last 2 weeks because there were 5 that I knew I didn't need to rewatch. Because we watched them recently for other podcasts we have covered. So within the last 6 months, I've been consuming a lot of Tom Cruise. Ranking everything down to all 31 of those films, you don't get below 2 stars for Tom Cruise for me until you hit his 26 is his last 2-star film.
Yeah.
Like he the quality of the films that he goes in. Yeah, he has his slot, right? He has the movies that Phil just listed, The Firm, Cocktail, Night and Day. These are The Mummy. These aren't great movies. There's some entertainment in most of them, but a lot of these movies that Tom Cruise was doing in the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s, and then to just bolster it all up with one of the greatest action franchises of all time in Mission Impossible, he's just so solid with the movies he comes out with. He knows how to act. There are some performances that we are going to be talking about today that are just bar none, some of the most fantastic things. Like, so much so that, like we even said, we're not counting Tropic Thunder, and that might be one of his best performances.
Yeah.
But and there are a lot of these movies that I think people kind of soured on back in the day when they were watching everything. And so a movie like, and I'm not sure if this is on your list, Phil, it's not on mine, but like something like War of the Worlds, Spielberg movie, often considered like one of his lesser movies. Rewatching that this week, that movie is so much fun because it just harkens back to classic sci-fi. And yeah, okay, Dakota Fanning screaming the entire time. What do you expect a child to do during an alien invasion? Like, let's be real. And that's the type of movies that we get from Tom Cruise. We get movies where Tom Cruise is just engaged. There are some movies that I'm sure people are going to be shocked I don't have in my top 10 that we're going to be talking about, because there are some Tom Cruise movies people are really high on that I'm not terribly high on. Something like, dare I say it, Top Gun, not one of my favorite movies. So it's not going to show up on my list. But there's so much fun in Tom Cruise movies. And that's the big thing I've learned over the last 2 weeks is when you watch a Tom Cruise movie, you're going to get some really serious movies. You're going to get some really funny movies. But in the end, you're probably just going to enjoy, like you said, Phil, the last great movie star. The person who being in a movie is enough to get people into theaters to see him.
Yeah, and St. Clippo here says it's wild. I don't know. Something about not calling Pitt or Damon a movie star feels wild to me. They're movie stars for sure, but when you look at them, like Damon definitely gets boosted a lot by like Interstellar, where he's a cameo, right? Like he just pops up in that movie very briefly. And obviously, like, yes, he has The Martian, which was massive. Pitt has some massive movies in there with the Oceans movies and stuff like that. But when you look at their box office compared to Tom Cruise, like it's not close. And that's the craziest thing. I hate Top Gun. I think that movie stinks. I really like Maverick, although Maverick didn't make my list, just because that's the quality that we're talking about with Tom Cruise movies here. That is nothing against Maverick. That's just the quality of Tom Cruise. But you have to think about what actors, Damon and Pitt can't do this, where 40 years ago, they made a movie that is still a classic of the genre that people talk about all the time. And then they make a sequel to that movie 40 years later. They can't do that. Like Pitt and Damon haven't done that. And yeah, Damon's been around since the late 90s. Pitt's been around since, I guess, the late 80s, early 90s. But they weren't at the Tom Cruise level, like with A Risky Business, with Days of Thunder, like with Born on the 4th of July. Like that movie comes out in 1989. It's getting him an Oscar nomination. This is when people were taking him that seriously that early on in his career. And then you look at now he's become this action star that's just massive. I am super, super, super excited to dive into this. Jordan Alford, though, has distracted me again. Phil, I'm watching The Deer Hunter for the first time tonight, finally getting to it. Hopefully, I did not overhype it for you, but that is my number one favorite movie of all time. So good luck, Jordan. You better enjoy it and get ready for a very, very, very heavy movie. I already said my number 10, so I might as well just start with it, right?
Yeah.
I messed up and slipped. My number 10, I am starting off with the movie that I think most people consider the best Mission Impossible movie, and I am saying Fallout. John and I rewatched them all. We've actually, to be totally frank with people who are patrons, we've recorded all of these already because I'm going on vacation the last week of May, and we were like, let's just rip this. So we're going to be doing the final reckoning on June 10th, but otherwise we have already done all of these. So we've watched Fallout, we've rewatched Dead Reckoning, we've done all that. I really enjoy Fallout. This was a 3.5 star out of 4 movie for me. I think ultimately it's the beginning that doesn't do it for me a lot, but this has the best third act of any of the Mission Impossible movies. I think it's absolutely awesome. And the Michelle Monaghan comeback in this movie is just so good. So Fallout is classic action. Even if I don't consider it like, some people consider this to be like one of the greatest action movies of all time. I disagree with that. But there's a lot of really good stuff in Mission Impossible Fallout. This is my 3rd ranked Mission Impossible movie. So I will have 2 more Mission Impossible movies. Number 1 may surprise you. Put that as the clickbait at the bottom. But I really do think that my number 1 Mission Impossible movie may surprise some people. So I have Fallout here as number 10. And we're starting off. That's just how good Tom Cruise's filmography is. Number 10 can realistically be Fallout. And some of you are going to be like, that's a really, really bad take. When I name the 9 movies ahead of it, it's hard to argue with really any of them. So go ahead, John.
Yeah, I mean, I have Fallout a little further up on my list, so I'll save most of my thoughts for it. But this is a movie that came out. The fact that we got a second trilogy of Mission Impossible movies that has now led into 8 total Mission Impossible movies, right? We're recording this 2 days before Final Reckoning will premiering at Cannes this year.
Yeah.
And
think about that, guys. A Mission Impossible movie is premiering at Cannes. Like this, like massive blockbuster action movie is premiering at a very pretentious like film festival that, yes, will have big premieres, but it's normally like the auteur. Remember, Cannes is what found Tarantino and those kinds of movies. And it's having Mission Impossible premiere on May 14th. I just think that that's hilarious and incredible.
And it just goes to show how important this franchise is to film. And Hollywood recognizes, and the film community recognizes how big Mission Impossible is. When this movie drops, I think it comes out in a week and a half now, stateside. Mm-hmm. This is going to make a butt ton of money.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the amount of money this movie is going to make is going to be ridiculous. There is so much hype around this. And yeah, it's the final reckoning. This might be the last Mission Impossible movie. Now, I've said it on the Patreon cast. I don't think we'll ever get to the last final, or we can definitively get to the last Mission Impossible movie until Tom Cruise is like legitimately dead himself. But this is one that really seemed to open up. The thing that I find with Fallout is it really opened up the eyes on the Mission Impossible franchise. Prior to Fallout, it felt like it was really like that guys type of franchise that, like, you go with the buddies to go see. And I think it really opened up the viewing audience of the Mission Impossible franchise. And I think that's really impressive to happen with a 6th entry in a film series.
Yeah, I remember this came out when I was living in LA, and I have a friend who absolutely loves these movies. And he was like, that should have been an Oscar nominated movie. And this isn't a friend who says those ridiculous things about like every action movie that comes out. This is somebody who, very much like has like an Everybody Wants Some poster in his apartment and like is into those kinds of movies. And he was like, no, this movie should have been nominated for Best Picture. And it's good. It's really solid. Again, it comes in as my 3rd favorite of the Mission Impossible movies. So John, what do you have as your number 10?
My number 10, it might be a little contentious for some people, but it's The Last Samurai. This was 2004. This movie came out. 2003, sorry. There were a lot of Tom Cruise movies in that 5-year span there. But this was one that I remember when it came out, there being a lot of hype around this movie. A lot of people really liked this movie. And it kind of had its reputation really sullied the further away we've moved from it, because there's a lot of focus on the white savior trope of it. This is a movie that pays so much homage to samurai films and just Japanese cinema in general. There's this real beautiful blending of Japanese cinema and American cinema in the film that really makes it so beautiful to look at. It's a very compelling story, despite the white savior trope's a little.
I got so much to
but
say about the white savior
I-
trope in this movie because I actually don't think it's there. I have a big time argument to make that it's not there.
I kind of agree because, I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's what everyone focuses on because it's like, oh, well, Tom Cruise is like the main star of this movie. Sure, he might be the like primary protagonist, but Ken Watanabe by far is the star of this movie. His character is by far the most compelling. He is the one you're most interested in. And you watch to see what Tom Cruise is doing in this movie and what his character is doing. His character, yes, it has that white savior trope of being incorporated into the culture that is around him that we see so much. But it's not like they're winning because Tom Cruise is there. Yes, he helps kind of with some of the tactical stuff in the final combat, but like he's not the reason anything is going anyone's way.
I think that's the biggest thing. I have The Last Samurai actually higher up. So the interesting thing with The Last Samurai is you hit this right on the head. This came out in 2003 and already critics were complaining about that element of it, right? Like critics have this whole problem where they can't just turn their brains off and watch the movie. And you know what? If it is a white savior movie, that's what this movie is then. And I don't know. I understand why that can be a negative trope, but if the intentions are good and the movie and the story are good, I don't understand why that's automatically a negative. I think that just became an automatic negative for too many people too fast. Like Dances with Wolves is a great movie. That a lot of people disagree with me on saying that. Dances with Wolves is a great movie, but that is way more of a white savior movie. And I think that The Last Samurai incorrectly gets lumped into these types of movies because Tom Cruise is the main character. But what white savior movies, what that trope needs to have in order to make the movie a white savior movie is it needs to have the white character uplifting and fixing the society he's in and essentially telling them, you're not doing it right. Here's the way to do it. And in reality, in this movie, he is recruited by Japan to go and try to help modernize Japan. And what ends up happening is when he joins the samurai, he actually starts to learn that his ways are wrong, not the other way around. And I think that's what's really important. There is never a moment in this movie where he is telling them, here's the gun that you're going to use to kill these people. Here's this that you're going to. He gets into the whole death before dishonor kind of thing. And that's why I think The Last Samurai is a brilliant movie. Maybe one of the most underrated movies of the 2000s because nobody talks about this. And I have it much higher up in my list than you do here.
Yeah, and I totally respect that because this is just like, it's a very solid movie. It's very entertaining. And I think over the last couple of years, you and I have both spent a lot more time with Japanese cinema. And I think it leads to us appreciating this movie a lot more for what it is. And maybe that's also part of the reason why it's kind of left to the wayside is because either people compare it too much to Japanese cinema or people are watching it and they don't expect these Japanese tropes to be in the movie. And they do go in thinking it's just this white savior movie and are focused on that aspect of it instead of seeing what it's doing from an artistic standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, I think it's actually very respectful of Japanese culture. And George, as I'm talking about, wow, we're getting the Mission Impossible movie. Jordan Alford's over here. The last 3 years, Cannes has been more open to blockbusters debuting. They debuted the last indie movie too. So that shows you what I know. That shows you how much I pay attention to what's debuting at Cannes. But I still think it's cool that this Tom Cruise movie of all Tom Cruise movies there, because Last Samurai almost feels like something more that would be debuting at Cannes, right? Of like, it's an action movie, but it has Tom Cruise. It's more of a world movie. I think The Last Samurai is fantastic. And I think that the premise of The Last Samurai is so believable and so well done that to me, it doesn't actually feel like it dives into some of the more problematic points of what makes these white savior movies. So can't wait to talk about that one more when I get there, because I'm not there yet and I'm not getting there next. So what's your number 9?
My number 9 is Michael Mann's Collateral.
Hey, I have the same movie at number 9. Is this going to be our only matchup?
Possibly. I think there's some midsection that we might get.
Oh, wait, what am I talking about? Our top 2 are going to be the same.
Yeah, but I think we might have them inversed.
Oh, okay.
But this was a movie that I remember. Again, this was 2004, right? This one's the 2004 movie. That's why.
I need to check that.
So for those who,
Yeah.
I know, Jordan, number 9 might seem egregiously low for Collateral for some people. This is a movie that a lot of people really enjoy. And I'm not a big Michael Mann fan. And the reason why this movie does not get higher for me is because there are some directorial choices that Michael Mann makes that I'm not a fan of. I
Yeah.
don't like, there's like this intentional grittiness he goes for with the filming style that that more feels like it's distracting from the film than adding to it for me. But wow, this is a movie that it took me way too long to watch for the first time. Tom Cruise as this like silver fox villain. Weird to think of Tom Cruise with gray hair ever, because the man does not age.
Yeah.
It's so bizarre to see him this way, but he is so, his character of Vincent is just so terrifying in this movie. The way he operates, the way he's just controlling Jamie Foxx's character throughout. It's really, it's quite something. It's a very tense film the entire way through. And the fact that like you have Tom Cruise here, but you also have Jamie Foxx is spectacular.
Very against type too.
Yeah.
He plays kind of this like weakling, pushover kind of guy. You also get like small performances from Jada Pinkett Smith, Mark Ruffalo, Javier Bardem is in this movie. Like you have a lot of really good side characters in this movie as well. This one surprised me how much I knew I was going to like Collateral on a rewatch, because I remember when it came out, being 12 years old, I was like, that was cool. And then I remember watching it again in high school and thinking that was cool, but I haven't seen it since high school. And as I was watching, I was so into it. I think the conversation between Jamie Foxx and Jada Pinkett Smith at the beginning is awesome. That is so well handled, and like a man's man movie to have that kind of scene and that kind of dialogue, I thought was really, really good. It shows Michael Mann's touch there, like that he has a different level of touch than a lot of action directors. I mean, you get into the first murder scene from Tom Cruise where he lands on the taxi. That's awesome. And what it is for me is there's certain things in this movie that just haven't aged well. That montage of them driving with that terrible, terrible song playing. I don't even care if anybody thinks that song is good. It does not fit the movie at all. And that really is problematic for me in my viewing experience. I also think the scene in the nightclub is still good, but it does feel a little like more stilted because it's got that early 2000s, like it almost feels like you're watching it and there's like a stutter happening like every 5 seconds. And it's still awesome. And I mean, like the choreography is great. And sometimes it's nice to watch these movies that aren't just like Krav Maga, where it's like, oh, we're going to beat up, whatever. It's pretty fun. But the ending of this movie is great in the tower with Jamie Foxx out on the what do you call it? The parking garage. There's so much good stuff in here. Again, putting it at number 9, this is a 3.5-star movie for me. I'm putting it at number 9 because 7 of the 10 movies on my list are 4-star movies. So what am I supposed to do?
Yeah. Hey, this is my last 3.5-star movie. Every movie I have after this is a 4-star movie. And it is one where the thing with Collateral, this is the type of movie I can see myself revisiting many times in the future. Like that
more and more each time.
And that's the thing with Tom Cruise movies, is they're so rewatchable. We're going to get to some that are less rewatchable because they're a little heavy, but they're still just so good that you want to rewatch them.
Yeah, and Jordan brings up over here, he says, this should have been his next Oscar nomination after Magnolia. Absolutely. And if you look at that year, that was the year that $1 Million Baby won Best Picture. And Morgan Freeman wins the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor in what is very, very much a lead actor role. But Jamie Foxx wins it for lead, ironically enough, for Ray that same year. You had The Aviator, Alan Alda. You had Clive Owen and Closer. Jamie Foxx gets the nomination here in Collateral. And then Thomas Hayden Church gets the nomination in Sideways. And it's interesting that Jamie Foxx, to me, is the main character of this movie, but you can't be nominated at the Oscars in the same category twice. So therefore, with Ray happening, he can't get nominated for this, but he has a good publicist, he has a good agent, all of that. And so they decide to push him as supporting with all the heat behind him for Ray. It gets him the nomination over Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise should have been in there, in my opinion, even though Jamie Foxx is spectacular. He should have been in there, and he should have been in there over Alan Alda. I'm not going to argue with Thomas Hayden Church. I'm not going to argue with Clive Owen, and I'm not going to argue with Morgan Freeman. But he should have been able to find his way in there, even if Morgan Freeman really does rightfully win this Oscar, because he's a lead actor in this.
Yeah. I mean, Oscar politics, right? It's hard.
Yeah. I'll go with my number 8 then, since this is my last 3.5-star movie, and this is my second Mission Impossible movie. And I'm going to go with Rogue Nation. So Rogue Nation for me is kind of that really fun, high octane, exciting Mission Impossible movie that I think for me just entertains me more than Fallout. These two movies are really interchangeable in a lot of ways, but I feel like Rogue Nation is just a fun movie. This is a 4-star movie if Tom Cruise doesn't suddenly become invincible halfway through this movie. This, for me, and I dive into this deep on the Patreon podcast because I loved this movie. I thought it was so much fun. I think that Christopher McQuarrie does a great job with like telling the story, expanding on everything that we've seen before this, and really setting the direction for the way that this series was going to go, bringing in Rebecca Ferguson, bringing in Jeremy Renner, who is in Ghost Protocol. So I guess he's not really bringing him in, but still, whatever, like what he's doing with Jeremy Renner's character, I really enjoy. But all of a sudden, like halfway through the movie, that car accident scene and then the motorcycle scene, those two scenes for me, I'm like, everything in these movies aren't super realistic. Like I get that, but it's never been believed that like, you know, he's not Kevin Garvey. I just finished my Leftovers rewatch. It's not Kevin Garvey where it's like, oh, like the whole point is like, he can't die. It's like, no, we know that Ethan Hunt's stakes are legit. So when he's getting in these like very obviously should have multiple broken bones, probably should be dead scenarios, it feels weird because everything up to this movie has kind of been like, there's not anything out of the realm except for in Ghost Protocol when he bounces off the window. But otherwise, like it's all kind of stuff where like it makes sense. So it feels like a little bit of a jump for me. But other than that, I have no complaints about Rogue Nation. This movie is so much fun. It introduces some of the best characters, expands on some of the best characters, and really sets the stage for what makes this franchise so exciting down the stretch.
Ghost Protocol is it's the Bond moment. And we talk about this on the Patreon. It's the Bond moment in the Mission Impossible franchise where we're introduced to the Syndicate. You
mean Rogue Nation?
Rogue Nation, yes, sorry. Yeah. Rogue Nation, it introduces us to the Syndicate. It puts this bigger perspective on what the IMF is doing. And it puts more stakes on it. Because really, when we look at the first few Mission Impossible movies, when we look at like the first Mission Impossible, we're trying to get the knock list and stuff. And really, it's a revenge movie more than anything. And then we have the second one is like, oh, here's this virus. The third one has the rabbit's foot, and which we don't know what it is. It's fine. It's just a MacGuffin.
Never will.
And then we start getting into, with Ghost Protocol, we get into nukes and stuff. This one gets into there is an organization working against the IMF. And it's so fun because this is where it really kind of embraces the spy aspect. And yeah, Ethan Hunt gets a little invincible here. And part of it, I think it would be more believable if you just had a helmet on in that motorcycle crash. But you can't put a helmet on Tom Cruise.
That's it. That's all you needed. Did you do you have this movie on your list or no?
No, I don't.
Okay. Yeah, I really enjoy Rogue Nation though. And Sean Harris, such a great villain. So underrated. Good. And like I feel like Sean Harris is somebody who should be in so much more stuff, and he just really isn't. And especially after the success he had with this movie and like how good he is in this, and then again, how good he is in Fallout, I'm surprised that he's not in more stuff because he is a damn good actor. He really is, and he's a great villain. So this is the only one where I think the villain is on par with Philip Seymour Hoffman in Mission Impossible 3. So, All right, John, what's your number 8?
My number 8, which I think we're at a point where some of these are going to be a little low for some people. I have A Few Good Men.
Yeah, A Few Good Men does not make my list, and I have reasons.
I know, and I'm sure we're going to hear all about it. But
you are.
Ultimately, what this movie is, and this is another interesting thing when it comes to Tom Cruise, because I think Tom Cruise is often a vehicle for the artist he's working with, right? As an actor, he brings his own panache to everything he does, but he is a vehicle for some very high caliber writers and filmmakers. And this is one of those instances where I think he really delivers. And I know what your argument is, and I'm going to rebuttal it when you get to it. But Aaron Sorkin's writing in this movie is spectacular. It's really great. And when Aaron Sorkin is on his game, he is one of the greatest scriptwriters of all time. The closing scene or sequence of this film in the courtroom between Tom Cruise and Jack Nicholson is spectacular. There's a reason why it's such a prolific scene in cinema and everything. And it's just, I find this movie so compelling because of where Tom Cruise's character starts. Because of how Tom Cruise was cast like he had this very cocky arrogance to him in a lot of his characters throughout the 80s and 90s. Right? You see the same thing in Top Gun. You see the same thing in, well, pretty much any, like Days of Thunder, all of these movies, right? That he's going through then. And it's okay to kind of typecast him that way because in the end, we usually get the resolution and he like evolves as a character. This is one where he starts so cocky. And I know, Phil, that you don't like this character. I know you don't like this character because of how cocky he is and how that comes off. But because of that, as he gets more and more invested in everything, and he starts working towards the trial to actually figure out what's going on, but ultimately tells them, hey, like, take the plea, because he doesn't think he can get them off, because he has to get to a point where he has to play Jack Nicholson's character in order to get what he wants. And then we get that heartbreak of a final verdict too. But it's just so compelling to watch that evolution of this character because of how terrible that character is at the beginning.
All right. My thing with A Few Good Men is on this rewatch, I enjoyed it more. I thought this was gonna be like a 2-star movie for me. I ultimately gave it 3. Jack Nicholson's performance is absolutely insane, but he's barely in the movie, which is a bummer. There needed to be more courtroom in this movie, in my opinion. The 2 biggest problems I have with this movie are Demi Moore and Tom Cruise. And it's not that they're bad. Demi Moore, I would almost argue, isn't very good in this movie. But the thing with Tom Cruise in this movie is it's not that he's cocky. It's they're having a conversation with him about these 2 people who might be killed. And he's like, oh, I'm hitting a softball. Like, I'm hitting a like it's a cartoon. It's a cartoon. And I think sometimes with Aaron Sorkin, when Sorkin is on, he's the best. That's why The Social Network is really high up in both of our top 100s.
Yeah.
But like Sorkin thinks he's so smart sometimes, and it's not as smart. And that, to me, it's like, I get that this was based on a stage play. That felt like a stage play, like that was also set in a high school. It's just so unrealistic and unbelievable to me that somebody, no matter who their father is, could get through the Naval Academy and do what he's doing and like get to this point in his career being this dismissive and this disrespectful to every type of authority. I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. And it's like, well, he went through the academy. You get kicked out of the Naval Academy. It's too goofy for me. It's too over the top. And the problem is like when we're thinking about him and like all the scenes of him trying to figure out the case, there's some great moments there, but there's other moments where for me, it's just way, way, way too cartoony. And when Kevin Pollak is your straight man, that's a problem. Because Kevin Pollak should never be Kevin Pollak is the why is he in the crew for The Usual Suspects. He's not meant to be the straight man. And so that's the biggest problem for me. And like I said, Jack Nicholson being in 3 scenes of this movie, and this is my biggest problem, probably my biggest problem in the whole movie, the placement of the first Jack Nicholson scene is wrong.
Makes no sense. It shouldn't be there. It should not be there. And I agree with that.
Yeah. And that is a big problem because you don't realize that it's a flashback, but it's also a tell, don't show scene where it's like they couldn't figure out how they should do this. So they start the movie with the bags and everything like that. Then you hear whatever. And then all of a sudden it's this flashback to them having this conversation. You're like, wait, are they not realizing that the guy is dead? What's going on? And there's not enough of an understanding of why we're being shown that. That to me is so out of place in the narrative of this movie. And I've always felt that way. And for me, that knocks it down a half star itself too.
I think that scene in particular is one of the issues with the narrative of the movie because the And right, like the you can't handle the truth of this movie hits so much harder if we don't know it's the truth.
Or if this, or if this literally plays like this should almost be the first scene of the movie. Like if this should be the first scene of the movie, or you don't show it. I agree.
Yeah, and I think like it is kind of like one of the big blemishes on this movie. I agree, but overall, I just really enjoyed this movie. It's a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah. All right. Well, what do you have at 7?
The first Mission Impossible movie on mine is Mission Impossible Fallout.
Okay, so you also have Fallout. How many Mission Impossible movies do you have on your list?
Just 2.
Okay, and I know what your other one is. Okay,
You do, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, Mission Impossible Fallout. One thing we didn't mention previously is Christopher McQuarrie has done such a phenomenal job with this franchise, and a lot of it comes to his respect for this franchise. There are so many callbacks as you're watching these movies that harken back to things further in the movie. Yes, obviously in Fallout we have the Michelle Monaghan of it all, and how much he's taken this plot point from Mission Impossible 3 and made it so pivotal to this character. The moment where you get to that camp and you just hear Ethan is one of the greatest character reveals in all of film. It is just a moment where it's like, oh my God, this is happening right now. And go to the beginning of Fallout when they're interrogating the guy in the hospital room and it's the fake room. That is a callback to the very first scene we see in the entire franchise that people have probably forgotten about. Because quite frankly, a lot of people didn't go back and watch the first Mission Impossible movie. For a lot of people, this franchise now starts at Mission Impossible 3. But to have this type of respect for the franchise that Christopher McQuarrie has, and to kind of culminate it in this, Christopher McQuarrie struck such a good balance between the action and the serious tones of the franchise with the comedic tones that Brad Bird went a little too far with in Ghost Protocol. What's his name? Now that I can't, Henry Cavill cocks his arms in this fight in the bathroom, and it is still like it's comedic, but it doesn't feel really out of place. It's not like super goofy.
It feels like his character.
Yeah, it just feels like his character, who turns out to be like a phenomenal villain. And we get the introduction of the White Widow and Vanessa Kirby, and that's so fantastic. We're expanding on the story from Rogue Nation. It's a great movie, fantastic. The stakes feel so high in that third act. That third act is so great. The fact that you get to a point where everyone on the team is split up and they have to coordinate something, but they can't communicate. So they just have to have trust in each other and know that they're going to get it done and be able to do it all at the same time is absolutely spectacular. It is what Mission Impossible is.
I have the first Mission Impossible as my next movie. So it's fun that we're kind of talking about, this movie and how it is what Mission Impossible is and getting into like how these characters all interact. And I'm going to go and I'm going to say the best Mission Impossible movie is actually the one that's the most standalone out of all of them. I love the way that this first one is done. And I think that pretty much everything that you're saying while you're talking about this movie, and I had Fallout here at number 10, is ultimately why I like Mission Impossible more, because so much of this does feel so Bond-esque. Now, the one thing that this movie has that the Bond movies doesn't have is a team, right? Bond will have a team here and there. He's got Q and he's got Moneypenny and he's got M and he's got all of that. But at the end of the day, it really is James Bond and then whatever girl he picks up on the route. Whereas this movie, it is like we know the characters that we've seen play out. But I go back to the first one and I say, it is the most unique, defined movie of the franchise. It doesn't go into any Bond tropes. It's almost like a procedural spy, right? Like it has that, it's based on a TV show and it has a TV show feel to it. And I think that Jon Voight's performance in that movie is really great. I love that this gets into the double crossing, backstabbing, the masks, the big set pieces like we see with the what do you call it? The train sequence, the knock list sequence where he's dangling over the floor is one of the most iconic action moments in history. You get a lot of great supporting performances. And there's parts of this movie that feel a little cheesy, which is why the first time I watched this, I think I gave it 3.5 instead of 4. But then when I rewatched it, I'm like, no, that's the tone that De Palma is going for with this movie. He's going for the very like wink, wink. And so for me, like when they say the whole thing about like, oh, whatever hotel in Chicago, it's like, you know, that's going to come up later. The Drake Hotel in Chicago, you know, that matters. And it is like heavy exposition, but that's also kind of an ode to the show that it's based on. So I think that the first Mission Impossible movie is fantastic. The action sequences hold up. I love Tom Cruise's like on the run thing, where this movie at the beginning almost doesn't even feel like it's just going to be a Tom Cruise movie. It feels like you're going to get a little bit of everybody else. And then it just kind of finds its way into being Tom Cruise. But I think that this one is phenomenal. And that's why I have it as my number 7.
Yeah, the first Mission Impossible just missed my list. It's sitting at number 11 right now. And I agree, like everything you said, right? This is a spy procedural. It's a different take than everything. And what I really like is this is a much more as fun and as fun as the later, like the Christopher McQuarrie Mission Impossibles are. This is a much more personal story. And I enjoy personal stories, which is why we'll see where I get with my last.
So where's Rock of Ages then? Since Adam Jump was asking on the side.
Fun fact: not one of the 31 not one of the 31 Tom Cruise movies I have watched over the last.
I can tell you all with extreme certainty that I've never seen Rock of Ages, and I'm going to do my best in my life to never watch it.
But this first Mission Impossible, it starts. Like that opening scene in the embassy is so strong. Just when everyone starts dying all of a sudden, you're like, where is this movie going?
Yeah. Because there's big names in that scene too. Like with Kristen Scott Thomas, and then you're thinking John Voight is dead. Obviously, that's like the twist. But you know, Emilio Estevez, like he's not some like small time actor.
No, these are recognizable faces that you're seeing here. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, they're all dead. This is a Tom Cruise movie now.
Yeah, because everything goes wrong. And a lot of these movies would make it like everything goes right in the first sequence and then something goes wrong. And this movie decides to just have everything go wrong right from the beginning. You never see them succeed as a team, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, it's a great setup. And it spawned a franchise that has gone on for the last 30 years now. Like, it's arguably one of the most important action movies of all time.
Yeah. Well, I'll go to my number 6 then. It's one that we've already talked about. I have The Last Samurai. So coming in here, just missing the top half of my list. But again, I already said what I need to say about this movie. I don't think that the white savior thing is an issue in this movie at all. I think that that's just an easy thing for people to say when they want to have an easy cop out for why not to like this movie. Ken Watanabe is phenomenal. Hiroyuki Sanada is fantastic. I love that guy. He is so much fun to watch. Obviously, if you've seen Shogun, you know him. But he's been so good. That guy has had like a 25-year career that's been so good, and he's just starting to be recognized by the masses, which is crazy. But he is so good. I like the villains in this movie. I like kind of the take of like these very, territorial racist Americans who are like coming in, they've taken over, they've eliminated the natives is like what they're saying essentially the whole movie. And now they're going to go and they're going to help the Japanese people do the same thing. Except now they're going up against the samurai, and the samurai are this culture that has just been around in Japan for so long and like hidden in the mountains and coexisting in a way that the indigenous people in America were never able to because of how quickly it was like they were moved out and pretty much exterminated. And so you get to see that pushback and how it's like death before dishonor. I would rather die than ever go and give up this way of life. And it's a fantastic movie. It really is. It's such a well-made movie. So I have it here at number 6.
And it's definitely one that you have to think of in like a post-World War II context as well. Not one where you're just like looking at the Civil War aspect of this and like the post-Civil War and where they're bringing over this and like kind of starting the Americanization of Japan. But like, you have to look at this as like, this is a culture that was completely engulfed by Americans post-World War II and completely changed by that. And like, we're kind of seeing this here, and there's a lot more allegory to this film than I think a lot of people recognize.
Yeah, I agree. Where do you go with your number 6?
Well, we knew there was another Mission Impossible on my list, and it's here. I tried so hard not to have these two Mission Impossible movies together, but ultimately they ended up being. And this is going to surprise people for sure. It's Mission Impossible 3. I much prefer how personal this movie is. I really, really appreciate what J.J. Abrams does with Ethan Hunt as a character, turning him into someone who isn't just this spy. Like, and it comes at a really awkward point in the franchise, right? Like, we have the first Mission Impossible. He seems like he's kind of like this greenhorn. Like, he knows what he's doing. We can see what he's capable of. But what is his bigger role in the IMF? And then we get Mission Impossible 2, where it's like, okay, now he's like this suave action star type of character. What are we doing with this character? And Mission Impossible 3 is where we finally determine who Ethan Hunt is. And it has influenced every movie since then, obviously. It introduces Michelle Monaghan as this character who's so pivotal to Ethan that his entire world revolves around her. Everything he does moving forward in the franchise is based on his love for Julia. And yeah, we get this MacGuffin in the movie of the rabbit's foot. We don't know what it is. Hopefully we find out, because it looks like it might be in the final reckoning. So we'll see. But Philip Seymour Hoffman in this movie is absolutely spectacular. It is.
Which, again, he was in more. It's how I kind of feel with what were we talking about earlier? We weren't talking about any of
Jack Nicholson earlier.
Yeah, Jack Nicholson. Yeah. I just wish he was in more of the movie. I don't feel like he's in enough.
I think that's okay though. I think this is the type of character you don't need to see much more. I think a lot of the times in these action movies, especially, we get too much time with villains and we don't have this air of mystery around them. I think it's fine that we don't know exactly what's motivating this character.
And we talked about this on the Patreon. The movie shouldn't have started the way it started, and that's what bothers me, because it makes it seem like Philip Seymour Hoffman is going to be in so much more of the movie, and then when you get the start that you get, and then he's not in that much more, that bothers me.
Yeah, and I mentioned in the Patreon too that is one of my least favorite tropes in all of film.
Mm-hmm.
I hate it when we start a movie with this like climax aspect and we flash back and then we build up to it. I hate it because it takes out so much of the tension in there, but it still works here because we're just put into the, okay, where is this going? Again, we're coming off a movie where we saw Ethan Hunt rock climbing and then fighting on motorcycles and stuff. This is going into hey, Ethan's here. There's this woman here he seems to care about. We have no idea who she is. And there is this terrifying villain who is just imposing his will on Ethan beyond what we thought was capable. And where is it going? And yeah, it still has like some of these traits of like a J.J. Abrams. So there's a lot of lens flares in this movie. There's a lot of, character. It's a lot of actors. J.J. Abrams uses a lot.
Yeah.
You have Greg Grunberg's in this movie for a little bit. You have Kerry Russell, and it introduces Simon Pegg, who obviously is a massive collaborator with J.J. Abrams. But this is just one of those movies that it took a franchise that was really lost, because as much as great as a director John Woo is, his style just didn't translate to Mission Impossible.
Yeah,
it took
Mission Impossible 2 is we skipped it because it just is what it is.
It took a lost franchise and it established it into what would become a juggernaut, despite the fact that it wouldn't get a sequel for 5 years after it came out.
Yeah. I like Mission Impossible 3. I liked it more when I watched it right after Mission Impossible 2. When I didn't watch it right after Mission Impossible 2, I don't think it's as good. I like the story. The bridge sequence is amazing. I think that, there's some really good action moments. Philip Seymour Hoffman is great. The scene in the airplane is awesome when he's dangling out of it. That's cool. Mission Impossible 3 has everything. To me, it's a perfectly good action movie, but it is one that on my rewatch of the Mission Impossibles dropped by a half star. The other one that did that was Dead Reckoning. Dead Reckoning dropped a half star as well. What's your number 5? Now that we're at it, so we're all done with Mission Impossible, and we still have 10 movies to talk about, or at least we each have 5 movies to talk about, even though we have some duplicates. Or I think
I'm pretty sure we just have like 8 movies to talk about, but
I definitely have one you don't have.
Yeah, and I do too, because I'm about to mention it.
Okay, go ahead.
Because my number 5 is Vanilla Sky.
Yes.
And this is a movie that the first time I watched it, I was like, that's a good movie. I enjoy it. It's Cameron Crowe. There's so many distinct parts of this movie, and it's really hard to kind of figure out what's going on. It feels like it's kind of this like swarmy movie with like how Tom Cruise's character is in the first part of it, and then you get the introduction of Penelope Cruz, and then you have the car crash, and you're like, okay, where's this movie going? And then you have a third act that just completely blows it, like completely blows out every interpretation you have of this movie, puts it on its head. But this is a movie that, on a rewatch, I appreciate this so much more. And this is the type of movie that I think it really depends where you are in your life when you watch it to how much you appreciate it. Because this is one where I think if you are feeling down on yourself in any way, it almost hits too hard. You almost connect too much to Tom Cruise's character and like the self-pity and self-loathing he has for himself as he has this mask on, hiding his deformities and things like that. I think there's just too much and it gets too real. But when you are in a bit of a better place in watching this movie, it really resonates because you realize that. You can really delve into it and you can see it. There's the scene where at the bar where Jason Lee's character is telling him, like, why are you confiding this girl you met one time? And it's just so powerful. And it's just like, it shows you how damaged Tom Cruise's character is in this movie. And that's kind of the kickoff to the third act, or the second act too, right? Like, and there's a tonal shift there. And later in the third act, we find out why that tonal shift is there. And it's just this brilliant concept that just really, really resonated with me this time.
Yeah, St. Cliffo over here says Vanilla Sky's 2 phenomenal acts and a third act that left me unsatisfied 60% of the way into the movie. I thought I was watching a top 5 movie of all time for me. So what's funny is I had the opposite viewing. When I watched this for the first time, I loved it. I thought it was like a masterpiece. This time around, the opening bothered me a lot more. I thought it was a little too like early 2000s, like yeah, like too Cameron Crowe. Exactly. Like it was a little too goofy, a little too like, oh, isn't everything great? But then once and I had kind of forgotten what happens in the movie. And once the car accident happens, I was like, oh God, that's right. This movie is like goes wild. The one thing that Cameron Crowe does not get enough. So this is, in my opinion, the most underrated Tom Cruise movie. This has a 42% on Rotten Tomatoes. Critics did not like this. This was coming off of Almost Famous, which obviously Cameron Crowe knocked out of the park. Kate Hudson with her performance in that movie. Like people loved it. That was the crowd pleaser, bring you to your feet movie. And then Jerry Maguire was not long before this at 1996. So this movie was different and it was weird and people didn't like that because it didn't have that same crowd pleaser thing. It was too dark. It was out there. For me though, what he gets no credit for is how he directs the second half of this movie. From the moment that Tom Cruise falls on the sidewalk to the moment that Penelope Cruz wakes him up. Crazy that they're both Cruz. That just like clicked in my head. It's like weird to say Tom Cruise and then Penelope Cruz wakes him up, but they're like different Cruz. Okay. Sorry.
Don't forget that they dated for a little while too.
They did. I know that's wild. So she would have had to go Cruiz for like her last name. Just mix it up a little bit. But from that moment on, there's a total shift in the cinematography, the direction, the way the characters interact with each other, everything. That when the third act takes place and the big reveal comes out, you actually have noticed it the entire time. Because there's something very unrealistic about the open your eyes at that moment. And it makes total sense. And it's so great. That first shot of him waking up in the second act is her standing there with the vanilla sky behind her. And it sets the stage. I actually think the third act is great. I know a lot of people, when this movie came out, were like, it was too confusing. It didn't make sense, blah, blah, blah. This movie, to me, answers every question you could want it to answer. I enjoy this movie. I ultimately gave this 3 stars, but I understand why somebody would absolutely love it. It just, for me, it's the first act is too Cameron Crowe. That's a good way to put it.
And one of the things with this movie is I remember when I was like classifying it into genre and stuff, I had it listed as a sci-fi movie and I couldn't remember why. I was like, I know there's a sci-fi element to this movie. And then I watched it and we get to the third act. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. This goes off the wall. And the ending, when he's standing on the building and the only way out of it all is to face his greatest fear. It's just so fantastic. It's just so wonderful. It's wild. It's weird. It's a bit kooky, but it's so human at the same time.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna go to my number 5. This is a movie John does not like, and sometimes John's just wrong, and that's what happens. And you all know that I tell him when he's wrong. My number 5 is Risky Business. I had not seen this movie in so long, and this movie just hit for me on this watch, man. This movie, I loved it. And here comes my curse word for the evening. But the whole point of this movie, right? The whole entire premise of this movie is sometimes you just need to say, what the fuck? Sometimes you just need to say that. And to me, I love that that is what this movie is about because, this is a very American movie. It's this American high schooler. He's super wealthy. His parents want him to go to Princeton, but he's actually doesn't have that good of grades. And like, he's kind of hanging out with the burnout kids. Because when you're in America, no matter how wealthy you're growing up, whoever you're going to be is who you're going to be, right? Like you're going to either be this not very smart, maybe you get a couple extra hands along the way, but if you're a dick, you're a dick. And if you're not a dick, then you're not a dick. And that's how I feel when I'm watching this movie. And when I'm watching this movie, this whole idea of, I feel that when I was growing up, and I feel that it probably still permeates today, but I don't have a kid, so I don't know. But I feel when I was growing up, there was such an emphasis on like, you will go and get good grades, you will play sports and be good at sports, then you will go to college, you will do good in college, and then you will go on to your life and you will work a job that will pay a lot of money, you will start a family, and that is what you will do. It has been outlined for you because you have that opportunity. You were born somewhat wealthy, right? Or even just middle class, like middle class America. That's what middle class America is. And so for me, when I watched this movie, I was always kind of that person who said, well, like, what the fuck? I don't want, like, sometimes you have to go against the grain with some of this stuff. And I'm not sitting here being like, oh, I'm some rebel, but also like I work as a freelancer and I do a podcast about Survivor and movies as like my hobby. And it's like, that's different than what people I grew up with were going to do. And I love, though, this reminds me of The Graduate, where it goes from the, here's your basic premise. Now, how can we take that to the absolute extreme? And what's the absolute extreme? Now they're running a brothel out of his house. And I just love that. And Joey Pants is in this movie and gives a phenomenal performance. I can never say his last name, so that's what he gets cut down to. Rebecca De Mornay is great in this movie. Tom Cruise gives like one of his best young, I think this is his best young person performance, because like when you compare this to like his Days of Thunder, Top Gun, those kinds, Cocktail, all that, this is his best young person performance. I love this movie. This one just hit for me, and I can't wait to watch it again, honestly.
I think it's really weird because, like you said, I'm not a big fan of this movie, and I love coming of age movies, but for some reason, I don't like these type of like high school comedies type movies. They just don't hit for me, and I don't get it. This feels like a movie that I should love, and I really went into the rewatch because I was going to not rewatch it for a while, and then you watched it and gave it 4 stars, and I was like, well, maybe I have to give this another shot. And it still doesn't resonate with me, and maybe it is. And again, it's this cultural thing sometimes, right? Like maybe it is just too American of a movie for me to really appreciate. We've had this type of conflict before in our opinions of movies, but it's entertaining enough. It's good. It's just like, it just doesn't do it for me. It's not a movie that really resonates for me.
Yeah. Well, that was my number 5. And that was just one that, I would watch Risky Business, and it's out of all these movies, like that's a comedy, which he doesn't really have that many of. And I think it hits, even though it was made 40 years ago by a man named Paul Brickman, who never directed another feature length movie. So anyway, I'll go to my number 4 now. And I know that this is a movie that John's going to talk about. This is my only first time watch on this list. So everything else I had seen at least once before this. And that is Born on the 4th of July. And I am honestly a little shocked that this movie doesn't get universally praised. And I think that it's because at the time that it came out in 1989, a lot of people wanted to call Oliver Stone a propagandist. Yeah. Now, I am somebody who is like, whatever Oliver Stone, I'm sure Oliver Stone is very anti-war. I am pretty sure he is very liberal. So like him going very anti-Republican in this movie does not surprise me. But I am somebody who, when I sit down and watch a movie, my politics get checked at the door, right? My politics get checked at the door. Whatever story you're telling me, if it affects me on an emotional level, that's great. If it starts feeling like you're preaching to me, I'm probably not going to love your movie. This movie never feels like it's preaching to me. I love the setup with the Americana at the beginning of like the kids running around. Oh, you're getting your baseball cap, and oh, you're kissing the girl with the fireworks in the background, and this is what we're fighting for. And isn't it so great? Screw those Vietnamese. And then you actually get out there and it's like, and these are the horrors of the situation. You were bummed when you lost the wrestling match. How are you going to feel when you get shot in the chest and are paralyzed from your middle spine down? And I just think that like this movie starts off with such a ridiculous look at America, but that's how it wasn't. This is how it was being portrayed. And like Ron Kovic says throughout this movie, they have lied to us. They are destroying the youth of America by lying to us. The stuff in the hospital is harrowing. The scenes, his frustration of being in the wheelchair and people not understanding him and wanting to fight. And then what it eventually turns into, which is like, I love my country, but I hate what my country has done to me and other people my age. It's actually a really great, I felt so depressed the whole time watching this movie, and yet there's something uplifting about it. And so Born on the 4th of July, like, well done. This lost to Driving Miss Daisy for Best Picture. Don't remind me, but I must remind all of you. Driving, like, what are we doing? Like, what are we actually doing? Oliver Stone did win Best Director for this movie. And ultimately, Tom Cruise lost to Daniel Day-Lewis for My Left Foot, which I have not seen, but I always hear is one of the best performances. So there you go.
Yeah. So I mean, Born on the 4th of July is my number 3. So I think we've kind of inversed our last pairs here. But yeah, this was also a first time watch for me. Blew me away. And like, not a big Oliver Stone fan by any means, but this movie, like you said, it starts with this Americana, and it starts with this very uplifting Americana, the rah-rah, yeah, boys, we got to go, like, join the Marines, let's go to Vietnam. Every scene in Vietnam is just like, oh my God, this movie is going so hard.
And it takes kind of the Deer Hunter approach, Jordan, if
Yes.
you're listening, like, kind of cover your ears, but it takes the Deer Hunter approach of most of this movie takes place on American soil, but the Vietnam scenes are the most important to the change of the character's perspective, right? And I think that's what was so great about the Deer Hunter and why it resonates with me so much is like these stupid ass kids are celebrating, making fun of the Green Beret, and then they go out there and they come back and Michael doesn't even want his welcome back party, and that's the same thing with Born on the 4th of July. And he comes back and he's got that spirit of optimism. It'll be okay. Don't worry about it, Mom. Don't worry about it, Dad. And then he starts to realize like, no, I have to keep living like this. And he starts kind of blaming the people around him who chose not to go. And that was always the thing. Like I grew up in a pretty small town, like a blue collar. A lot of people went into the Marines and stuff like that. And there was this feeling when they came back that it was like, I'm better than you because you went to college and I went to the Marines. And it's like, but you chose. It's not like you were drafted. And like, I appreciate what you did, but don't make me feel bad about the decisions I made. And that's kind of what some of the people in this movie are doing. And he doesn't understand that. And then he starts to understand it. And he says, you know what? We are all fighting for the same thing, but we're not fighting for the American government to go and just destroy a country that we know nothing about. We're fighting for the future of America. And I think that's what's really profound about this movie.
It's so fascinating watching it because he spends so much time not opposed to the government and like fighting against the people who are telling him, what are you talking about? The government sacrificed you and many other people in Vietnam. And as like watching Tom Cruise's performance as he goes through this film, just like not accepting that fact and not confronting that fact and just being in such denial of that fact, despite the fact that in Vietnam, we see him massacre a village of elderly and children.
And kill one of his own men.
And it's devastating. It is absolutely, like, that was the moment. As soon as they opened up fire on that village, I was like, oh, this movie is not going to be happy.
Yeah.
But somehow, like you said, like, I think it's impossible not to talk about this and the Deer Hunter together. And I think maybe the existence of the Deer Hunter is why Born on the 4th of July doesn't get enough of attention. I also think, 1989, weird year for films when it came to like the Academy Awards and stuff. Obviously, Driving Miss Daisy wins Do the Right Thing isn't even nominated for Best Picture. And then we have this other movie that's very similar to a movie that came out, but Born on the 4th of July almost feels like the more optimistic approach to Vietnam than The Deer Hunter.
For
And like
sure.
neither, like they're both very pessimistic.
You're going to
movies.
feel awful watching it, though.
You feel terrible. It will absolutely destroy you. And when we finally get to the end of the scene and he is confronting the parents and the family of the man he killed, the man he was told never to say he killed, and he is explaining what happened in Vietnam, it's just devastating.
Yeah.
It's absolutely devastating. And then when we go to the National Republican Conference afterwards, and we see him fighting against it, and we see them hauling him out of it and like taking his chair away, and then we see him get reclaimed by the people he's there with to be like, no, we're going back in. It is really uplifting because it does kind of show this like idea of there are bad things happening here and we're not aware of it, and we have to stand up and fight for it, for the freedom of America.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's your number 3, my number 4, which means we did flop, and I'm just going to put them both up here. So your number 4, my number 3 is Minority Report.
Yeah. This movie surprised me. Because I remember liking it before. I was surprised how much I liked this on a rewatch.
This is the most underrated Steven Spielberg movie, and I actually don't think it's close.
Yeah, I agree.
Nobody talks about Minority Report anymore. This is a masterclass in world building. This is a masterclass in suspense. The CGI visual effects hold up so well.
Surprisingly
so well. Like, you're talking 2002, right? This came out. There's no reason that it should all hold up this well. This is brilliantly made. You have Colin Farrell. You have Max von Sydow. Again, I love getting Max von Sydow in a movie. Tom Cruise. These performances are phenomenal. And the premise of this movie with these creatures, whatever, these people who have just been kind of like poisoned by whatever drug it was. And now they can see crimes before the crimes happen. So now you're arresting people before a murder takes place, but then the people are being imprisoned without actually have committing a murder. And the system gets messed up so that Tom Cruise is being told he's going to commit a murder. And so now they're coming after him. Like, what a great high concept science fiction thriller. And every point of this movie hits for me.
Yeah. It's just one of those movies where it's just peak science fiction is really what it comes down to. It's not set too far enough in the future where it's like, okay, whatever, this is going to happen. And watching this movie in 2025, terrifying. Because it is so predictive of what our world is. There's the scene where he is walking through the mall and there are targeted ads going at him the entire time. That's our life. I hate to break it to you, everyone.
We're not in a mall. It's just while we're sitting here. Yeah.
Yeah. While we're sitting here, we are getting targeted ads based on just us being who we are. And they know that. But the philosophical concept and the moral quandary this film proposes of, can you convict someone of a crime they didn't commit? And is by preventing them from committing that crime, are they still guilty of that crime? Is so profound. You have to think about it the entire time. And then on top of that, you add the fact that they have these, the precogs, who are people who are just being treated terribly because of this ability that they seem to present. And all of that aspect of the film, the idea of there's no crime. So it's great because we've gotten rid of murder. Murder doesn't happen anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But we still see all the other crime that's happening too, right? There are drugs flowing freely in this version of America. And it's because there's so much focus on preventing murder, but murder is also the only crime they can prevent.
Yeah, because there's something like whatever it is about murder that just like gets to them so that they can figure it out. And then what ends up happening though, right? The people in the power end up being the most corrupt, because that's what happens. That's always, I mean, no matter what problem you try to solve, the people like Robespierre, right? Like, you go all the way back, man. No matter what you overthrow, no matter what you solve, the people who get into power always corrupt in some way, shape, or form, because they want what's best for them. And that's what happens with Max von Sydow in this movie. This is great. Jordan Alford says it's the second best Philip K. Dick adaptation. We both heavily disagree.
Yeah, I think it's
Blade
the
Runner
best.
stinks. But dude, the car chase scene in this movie is so awesome. I just love this movie. The only thing that got a little long, it felt like there were too many reveals in the third act. But maybe when I rewatch it, because I hadn't seen it in a long time, I think maybe when I rewatch it, I'm going to appreciate the fact that that happened. And still, I end up putting this as my third favorite on here, because really, like, there are some shocking moments in this movie, and it comes to a great, satisfying conclusion. So, yeah.
We didn't even talk about like the eye surgery scene and the entire scene in that complex with the like bug robots, like eye scanning everyone and everything.
It's so good. I mean, the eye scanner scene is so disgusting and so good. And you get the whole thing of like, you messed me up. You kind of ruined my life. And like, then it's the anxiety of, well, you're still going to get the surgery done anyway. You don't have a choice. You've already been hit with the anesthesia. That, if you haven't watched Minority Report in a long time, or if you've never seen it, that is the most underrated movie Steven Spielberg has ever made. And it's not even close. You almost forget how freaking cool Steven Spielberg was, because some of the movies he's made lately are so by the book. You forget how awesome this guy was when he was on his game.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, Steven Spielberg, please go back to science fiction, because we kind of desperately need it.
Seriously. And I just don't think he's ever going to, which is a shame. But
no.
All right, John. So I mean, we have the same thing going on here, right?
We do. And they're just inversed.
Yeah. So, all right.
And you've already said Magnolia is your number one. So Magnolia is my number two, everyone.
Yeah, and Eyes Wide Shut is my number two, and Eyes Wide Shut is going to end up being your number one.
Number one.
You start talking about both of these movies and why you have one over the other, and I'm going to type them in.
This is one of the hardest things, and this is kind of what I'm harkening back on something I said earlier on in the podcast. We were talking about A Few Good Men. Tom Cruise can just deliver an ode to his vision so well. And we are talking about two of the greatest directors of all time. And it's no question. This is just a preference thing here. These are both two exquisite films. And it's honestly a preference. And obviously, Phil loves Magnolia. It's his top 25 movies of all time. And I have come around on Eyes Wide Shut so much since first watching it. Like, this has gone to the point where it is my favorite Kubrick movie. And
you're wrong, but that's okay.
It's fine. It's fine. Opinions. Those are things.
You pause for so long there that I felt like I had to say something.
Yeah, so. I know. I was just waiting for you to say it. And
yeah, I know. You were waiting for it. I wasn't going to say anything, and then you waited, and I was like, well, if John's expecting it.
But ultimately, like, these two films are just so spectacular. And Tom Cruise in both of them is so incredible. Like, and the wildest thing about all of this, these movies came out in the same year.
Mm-hmm. It's insane to think about that he put out two of the best movies ever in the same year. And I mean, Tom Cruise, this is again where you go to, he can do everything. Like Magnolia, he should have won the Oscar. Michael Caine winning for The Cider House Rules is stupid. I've talked about that to death. If you want to hear a whole podcast about that, we talked about Magnolia when we went through our top 100 movies. But he can play the like somber, wandering guy in Eyes Wide Shut. He can play the fake, what is it? Like the fake bravado, sad misogynist who's got daddy issues in Magnolia. He can play this massive action star. He can play a war hero whose whole country has abandoned him. He can play a hell of a cop in Minority Report. Like, he can just literally play anything. And so you never know when a Tom Cruise movie is coming out what you're going to get from Tom Cruise. But more often than not, the movie's going to be great. Not just good, great. And obviously Magnolia is my number one because I love Magnolia. Magnolia is my favorite Paul Thomas Anderson movie. I think it's just a masterpiece, a crazy look at depression and intersecting lives that I just think is so incredibly well handled. But Eyes Wide Shut is another one that I hadn't seen in a really long time. And Kubrick is my favorite director. My top 100 is loaded with Kubrick movies. But when I sit down and I watch Eyes Wide Shut, I'm just like, he made something out of nothing here. Like, there is nothing here. And Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman obviously were dating at the time. And that movie is just so good. I really can't argue with you that you have Eyes Wide Shut over Magnolia. These are just two masterpieces. But like it all comes down to when you make your Tom Cruise top 10, it comes down to what your preference in movies is.
Mm-hmm.
There's very few wrong answers when it comes to Tom Cruise movies. And I think that's what's really cool. Like there's people who are like, I don't want those types of dramas, so I'm going to go with Minority Report as my number one, or a Mission Impossible movie as my number one. And that's fine. Or you want to go comedy, say Risky Business. It all works. And I think that's just what's so damn impressive about Tom Cruise's filmography. It's really, really incredible. But I can't talk. We did a whole podcast on Eyes Wide Shut on the Patreon a while back too. So if you're a patron and you haven't listened to that, you can go back in $5 Tuesdays and find it. And if you're a new patron, you can find it there too, because we talk so much about Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah. Yeah. These are two spectacular films by, like I said, two of the greatest filmmakers of all time. Mm-hmm. And Tom Cruise is just this vehicle who gets to deliver their art to us. And he does such a spectacular job. And the characters are so different in both of these movies too, despite the fact that these are these high dramas. So different, the way he presents himself and everything. And like we said, there are so many movies that there were movies I thought would be in this top 10 that didn't end up being in there. I thought The Edge of Tomorrow was going to make it in.
Yep.
Was surprised when
I had Maverick, Edge of Tomorrow, both of them in here for sure. Yeah, at the start.
Like those were movies that I was just like, this is great. Some of the movies that I went back and watched, The Color of Money is a very entertaining movie. It's more of a Paul Newman movie than it is a Tom Cruise movie, but it's good. And even like, yeah, he has some stinkers, right? Like The Firm, Night and Day, The Mummy. But they all have their like Night and Day is the only Tom Cruise movie I think I could never watch again because I don't find it entertaining in the slightest.
Insane Clipos says no Rain Man on anywhere on either list. And like Rain Man is a movie that a lot of people really love. Neither one of us love that movie. Sorry, but like you could love Rain Man, and I'm not going to sit here and be like, you're dumb. It didn't make my list. It's a 3-star movie to me, and I didn't have room for 3-star movies on this list.
Yeah, I mean, Jerry Maguire, we don't have on our list either. That's because he has a better Cameron Crowe movie, which is obviously Vanilla Sky.
Yeah.
There's a movie that I had in my top 10 Ridley Scott movies that's 21 on my Tom Cruise movies in Legend.
That's so funny, dude. You're so desperate with that Ridley Scott to just watch all of his movies.
I didn't do it. I couldn't finish the last 6.
I don't know why you did that to yourself anyway. I mean, at the end of the day, what the message here is Tom Cruise makes great movies.
Yeah.
Go watch some Tom Cruise movies. Get ready for the final reckoning, and that's what's going on.
Yeah. I'm excited. And Tom Cruise, there are not many actors. I don't know if there are any actors nowadays other than that are active still that I would be like, yes, this person's in this movie. I have to go see this movie. There are a couple coming up. I probably see whatever Mikey Madison does next.
Yeah, that's true.
Glenn Powell's super charming, and I'll see him. He's kind of like, he feels like he might get into our next Tom Cruise era here, but we'll see. And we're kind of seeing, we saw it with like Challengers and stuff, right? With Zendaya and stuff. We're seeing more and more of these type of actors kind of emerge to a younger generation who they're appealing to. Tom Cruise just still hits, and his career has spanned nearly 50 years at this point.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. So anyway, that's going to do it for our top 10 Tom Cruise movies. Let us know what you think we missed. Let us know your preferred top 10 in the comments here. Like this video, subscribe to the channel. Make sure you go check out Patreon if you're interested. We're diving into all of the Mission Impossible movies, except for number 2. So you can jump in now. We're like midway through, and you can hear the old ones and then get into the new ones too. Otherwise, thank you all so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will see you next time.